Hello and welcome to this Candid Conversation. My name's Steve Dunkerley. Hope you're well and staying safe during this coronavirus pandemic. So we're in the middle of June and the lockdown in the UK started 82 days ago, back on the 23rd of March. And like many countries around the world, the focus now is to gradually return to normal without triggering a second wave of the pandemic. So some of the key questions I'm going to be asking my esteemed panel today as we return back to our pandemic-proof offices are, how do we ensure productivity in our operations? Will we see a rise in any shoring or working from nearby? And to what extent has resilience become the central driver for automation and end-to-end digital operating models? So today, I'm pleased to be talking with two executives from Rolls Royce, a company that's been really instrumental in supporting the UK's frontline NHS with equipment like ventilators as part of the Challenge UK consortium. So welcome to Declan, Guerin and Dr. Stephanie Fitzgerald. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Also pleased to welcome Andrew Harding, the Chief Executive Management Accounting at the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, which is the unified voice of CIMA and the American Institute of CPAs. And with 650,000 members, is the largest association of public and management accountants in the world. So great that you can join us, Andrew, as well.
Thank you. Hello.
Good stuff. But starting with Declan. Declan, I've known you throughout your time at Rolls Royce, and it's been really great having you join our various events I've organised over the years. So looking at your career at Rolls Royce, you're initially the CFO of the Marine Division back in 2015. And in your current role, you're the Group Chief Restructuring Officer. So tell us how prepared Rolls Royce was for the lockdown and what were some of the challenges and how do you adapt and manage change in this crisis?
Yeah, it's a good question. And before I get to that, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Steve, and it's good to see you again. And also, I would like to say that I'm one of the 650,000 members. I'm very proud to be, and it has had a very formative impact on my career and career development. So always a very big sponsor of CIMA when I'm out and about. Then back to the question, and for companies like Rolls Royce, we're a FTSE 100 company. We obviously have very strong governance in place with our board and the subcommittees of the board, including the audit committee. And we take risk management and risk assessment very, very seriously. You know, every year, if you go and look in our annual report, you will see that there's a section around principal risks. You can go and read it, it's online. And under those principal risks, we look at things like health and safety and business continuity, which both cut across very clearly what we're dealing with now. In a way, you could read it and you could sort of see, well, that all seems very dry. And of course, they have to fill in those boxes. But we do make this live, and it's a key part of both the group board, the group audit committee, and it cascades down through the organization. So we have, mostly as part of our business continuity, looked at different types of risks that could cause disruption to Rolls Royce. And that could be a natural hazard. It could be a political event, for example, bankruptcy of a major customer or supplier, and also infectious disease, which is part of that framework. And we generally look at these through different sort of lenses. So we have an incident management framework. We've got a business continuity readiness assessment framework. We do audits of these things, including suppliers, and we do drills and training exercises as well. So we've been fairly ready to deal with these types of issues when they come along, and we've mobilized very, very quickly. And we have, in this case, done that as well with the safety of our people foremost in mind, and then, of course, our customers as well. And what any insider in Rolls Royce knows as well is that we're at our best when there's a crisis. And I think we've seen that shine through in terms of some very, very pragmatic actions, along with the more standard incident checklists that we have.
So yeah, it sounds pretty rigorous. So quite a mature business continuity plan you have there, and sort of a strategic risk framework ready for any sort of event to happen, basically. So that sounds pretty reassuring to be working for Rolls Royce anyway. But yeah, bringing Andrew in from the association, I know that your organisation is very in tune with sort of Rolls Royce and the leading industrial companies globally. Declan tells me that there's around 200 or so finance execs currently within.
It's probably more.
Probably more.
Probably a lot more.
CGMA is there within Rolls Royce. So I mean, I know that also every year in May, you have a large number of candidates from all walks of life sitting their CGMA exams in sort of testing centres everywhere. So what's happened to the exams? Obviously, this is a pandemic now, and what's happened to the exams this year? And do the priorities and challenges mentioned by Declan align with what's happening with your own corporate members at the moment?
Steve, they certainly do. And firstly, thank you for inviting me to join you today. We've CGMA as an organisation, we celebrated our centenary last year. We've had 100 years of working with businesses such as Rolls Royce, and these things are very much a partnership. We effectively provide learning and assessment which supports the professionals who Declan and his team are relying on to deliver that risk assessed environment. And for us, keeping that assessment thing going was critically important, both from a point of view of our own business, but also for our members and for our future members. An interruption in that people development process is another business interruption, which is not needed at the moment, and it's just at the time when I think we can safely say, for businesses in finance in particular, it was their management accountants who were being called on more than any other discipline within finance. We had a little bit of a tester of this back in January. January, New Year, our exam centres in China were closed down, but we did what I imagined would have been 2 years' work in a 6-week period to shift the exams. So rather than having to attend an exam centre, candidates would be able to sit the exam at home. That all got off at the beginning of May, and I think around about 6,000 candidates went through during May, and at the 1st of June we had another 5,000 lined up in the pipeline to go through that process, and it continues in that way. It mitigates risk. It changes things that we're going to do. I always imagined we would do this at some point, but my timeline was 2022. That would be early to go to this. I wasn't expecting to go so quickly, but it shows what's possible, and technology has certainly given us an opportunity to deal with this pandemic that we wouldn't have been able to deal with a decade ago.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's China obviously gave you a head start in getting things prepared, but it sounds like a massive feat getting 6,000 people examined and remotely, especially with being invigilated as well. So it was had that quality control there as well. So congratulations with that.
Thank you. It's not been easy, and I won't claim it's been perfect.
Yeah,
but
excellent.
I think candidates have been very understanding. Their employers have been very understanding, and we're happy with how it's gone so far.
Exactly. So obviously with the lockdown easing though, I felt it was really important to bring in an expert to talk about the challenge of returning to the office. So I was really grateful when Declan kindly introduced me to his colleague, Dr. Stephanie Fitzgerald. Dr. Fitzgerald works closely with Rolls Royce's Chief Medical Officer, I understand, Dr. David Rooms, and she's part of the GBS organisation that provides HSE services, or health, safety and environmental services, to the Rolls Royce Group, and also the lead practitioner for mental health. So great to have you with us, Dr. Fitzgerald. And many companies are anxious about returning to the office. I mean, how much should they be pandemic proofing at the moment? Should be wearing masks, installing temperature scanners, deep cleaning all the time in the office? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question, and just to echo the thoughts of my colleagues, thank you for having us today to talk about this. It's a really important topic. The pandemic proofing, I think, is a really interesting one, because there can be a knee-jerk reaction where, we need to be giving everyone lots of PPE, we need to be upping our cleaning regime to 20 times a day, we need to be wiping everything over. And for me, I think what we need to remember is our greatest weapon against the virus is strict personal hygiene and distancing. And that doesn't change when we return to work. So if we were to, for example, up our cleaning regime so that we had cleaners coming in 20 times a day, it takes one employee to not wash their hands and touch that surface that's been cleaned for the 20th time, and all that cleaning is null and void. So what we don't want to do is take away the individual responsibility of employees. As for PPE, it's really important that you follow the guidance that's issued by the government, by the authorities in wherever you are, in whatever location. That's first and foremost, that we adhere to that. And of course, at Rolls Royce, we're following evidence-based scientific practice to ensure that we're keeping everyone safe. But you do have people who see things online, or they see things on Facebook or on social media, and they say, why aren't we being temperature screened? Why aren't we all being given masks and gloves and everything? And I think my personal experience, having worked in the NHS, is PPE is really popular with people who've never had to wear it. So it's not practical to sit wearing a face mask for 8 or 9 hours a day in an office. It's just not. You will become hot, you will develop pressure sores, you will develop a rash around your mouth from the moisture and the trappings, and actually what you're creating is a beautifully moist, germy environment for other illnesses. And what happens is people get uncomfortable, so they touch or they pull down the mask, and then it's instantly null and void. So we do everything we can at Rolls Royce to make sure that we can bring people back so they can adhere to the guidelines, which is social distancing and access to plenty of cleaning materials and hand wash and etc., so that they can keep their workspace clean, they can keep themselves adhere to good personal hygiene. But we're not going to start sort of throwing money at unrealistic and unsustainable pandemic proofing with no evidence base behind it. So we're absolutely doing what we have to do, but we're also saying to everyone, let's take a very sensible approach to this. Our biggest weapons are strict personal hygiene and social distancing. Let's stick to those.
So yeah, it sounds like a common sense approach. And I guess communication is key, getting the message, reinforcing that message. Like you said, if one person slips up, even though you're cleaning 20 times a day, if they're not washing their hands, for example, then you've got a problem. So, but you mentioned distance, and I know that Andrew's just written a paper for FM magazine about the 2 meters. Obviously you're following the guidance, but what are your thoughts, Andrew, maybe on that 2 meter rule?
Throughout this pandemic, we've been talking to groups of finance leaders from across the world, and we've been having these conversations really by region, talking about what their concerns are, what's top of mind for them. And we've probably been doing these every 2 or 3 weeks. Last week we did one with UK CFOs, and some things really came out from that. One was this social distancing issue. There is so much variation on that around the world. In the United Kingdom, we're on 2 meters. The Americans are on 6 foot. In Germany, they look at 1.5 meters. In France, they're at 1 meter. In China, where we have offices, they're at 1 meter now. There's uncertainty as to where we're going. Certainly CFOs we speak to, they have businesses, they have customers. Their businesses are viable at 1 meter. They're not viable at 2 meters. We then see commentary about, well, it might be relaxed. They're going, actually, we need certainty. I think what we all know is uncertainty raises business risk. That in turn reduces economic activity, and will slow recovery. If we're going to move from 2 meters to 1 meter, before we've completely committed ourselves and invested in 2 meters, let us know, is it going to go down to 1.5 meters? Let's just get ourselves in one place, because it's your retail sector is putting an awful lot of money in. Even the signage, there's been millions of pounds spent in the last 2 weeks on signage saying 2 meters. If that's going to change in 3 weeks' time, that's going to just double up that expenditure. And again, unnecessary cost. We have to do the right thing. Businesses will follow and should follow government advice in whichever territory they're operating in. But it's that craving of certainty. That whole piece around uncertainty and risk just comes into it. One of the other big things they're talking about is, almost with an exclamation mark, Brexit is back. We've forgotten about that for the last 83 days. Now, again, it's another piece of uncertainty. Just let us know what's going on, and then we can get on with running our businesses.
Stephanie, what are your thoughts on the 2 meters, 1.5 meters, 1 meter thing? Are you happy with the current guidance? And do you think it's, obviously businesses need to be productive, but what are your thoughts?
I think it's a really interesting one. I think first and foremost, I think we need to adhere to the guidance that's given to us. I think that's so. Whether we agree with it or not, at the moment in the UK it's 2 meters, so we stick with 2 meters. I am in complete agreement with Andrew that if it's going to change, we need to know before, because Rolls Royce has also invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money into making sure everything's signed, everything's separated where it needs to be. But also, as well as business risk, uncertainty generates anxiety. And so there are a lot of people you will see walking around the UK who are very wedded to the 2 meter rule now, because in their head, that's how I stay safe. So I have walked along the pavement and seen people step into oncoming traffic to stay 2 meters away from me, which again, we can see how that fixation on one rule stops you mitigating other risks. So I think it's really important that whilst we, absolutely adhere to the guidance, and, Rolls-Royce, we're a global company, but exactly as Andrew's saying, we've got colleagues in Singapore sticking to 1 meter, we've got colleagues in America with 6 foot, we're in the UK with 2 meters. It's such a variation. So we absolutely encourage people to stick to the guidance, but I would absolutely echo Andrew's thoughts there around if it's changing, just let us know, give us that heads up so that we can prepare, definitely.
Indeed. I mean, then there's obviously the issue of the potential second wave of the pandemic. But what's clear is that the pivot to working from home is generally pretty smooth, I think, especially with the exams that Andrew's organisation were organising. So, looking at that sort of future of work and the role of working from home, is working from home sustainable in the long term, especially from a productivity perspective? What are your thoughts on that? Anybody?
Me to fire off first. Let me have a go.
Sure.
We're running a much smaller operation than Rolls Royce, so we're not dealing in manufacturing, so we have a very different scenario. We've been surprised at how well it has worked. Certainly for the 80 odd days that we've been doing it, and it's been enabled by technology. It's been helped by having recent office moves that have forced us to upgrade technology. We moved to it relatively seamlessly. We gave a sort of work from home advice sometime around the 12th of March in London, and we closed the London office on the 17th of March. There are people who'd like to come back because it's actually physically uncomfortable to work from home. There are others who'd like to come back because there are some productivity issues. There are teamwork issues where sometimes actually being in that physical proximity can help, having the right people in the right place. But it will never look the same. It'll never go back to the way it was. One thing we have got, the stigma around working from home, which people would sort of there'd be a nudge and a wink. Yeah, it's just a day off, isn't it? That's gone, and that's great. But there are other thoughts that we end up having now. We had formalised home workers with particular contracts. Would we move everyone onto that sort of contract? Probably not. How does that look in future? That delineation between home workers and office-based workers has gone. So much has changed. Not just the practicalities of it, but the legalities of it as well, all sorts of other things. There's a lot we have to go through, and a lot of our HR professionals have to work on.
I think from my side, there is a big difference between working from home and being forced to stay at home during a global pandemic and trying to work. And I think it's really important when companies are reviewing the productivity at this time, they take into account that schools are closed. People don't have access to childcare, to pet care, to dog walkers, to carers for their elderly parents. We've lost all our resources that allow us to be productive human beings at work. And so I would encourage people not to look at productivity yet. Wait for the world to reopen, wait for things to get back to this new normal, whatever that may look like, then review your productivity. Because for me, this isn't working from home, this is being forced to stay at home and trying to work. I'm someone very familiar with working from home. I was working from home a couple of days a week anyway, and so for me the switch to full-time working from home, I miss my colleagues and I miss that interaction, but the actual process of work, I was quite well set up to continue to do that, so that's been fine for me. But I know colleagues who are working in exceptionally challenging circumstances, juggling childcare, elderly parent care, pet care, juggling all sorts. And so I think it's really important. I personally, my belief is this isn't working from home. I think exactly as Andrew says, we have blown the myths out of the water of, oh, it's just a day off and you're not being productive and you're not doing this. I've seen people really, really manage those challenges exceptionally well at Rolls Royce. And I feel really proud of everyone for being so flexible and agile in just jumping to that challenge. And yeah, if I can work from home, then I will. But let's hold off reviewing productivity compared to office productivity until people are in a position where they can work uninterrupted, unfettered by all these things that are challenging us at the moment. That would be my view.
If I could build on that, and I've spent probably the last 25 years mixing working from home with working in an office. And the thing that I've noticed, because Rolls Royce is quite campus based, so Derby, for example, with so many people there, people go to the office, and the discipline of getting in your car, driving to the office, does buffer your day a bit. And I think there's a discipline or a learning that people are learning that when you work from home, you need to do the same. You don't have to crawl out of bed and open your email at 6:30 in the morning. You can do the normal things, get ready for work, go for a walk, or whatever else. And I think also from a leadership perspective, we have to tell people that and reinforce to them that you have a bit more flexibility in your schedule. Use it, but we don't want to be in a position where either by neglect or lack of attention that gets somehow abused. So that's kind of one sort of learning from my perspective, and just to make sure that that is the case. The other thing I think is around the productivity. I think we'll see a surge in productivity, but it probably will come at a cost. You've got isolation and other things running in the background as well. So that needs to be borne in mind. But I think the nature of our business, we have production, so people physically making things in factories, and they are back at work under certain protocols. But all the back office and everything else, they're distributed, but they can work for extended periods of time outside of that social context of coming together. But if we look at maybe just a little bit broader, and it's just as an aside, but I'm actually a board member of an institute called Roffey Park, and they do OD and leadership training on site in a campus down in Sussex. And from one day to the next, their revenue model in a way has dropped to zero. But the plus side of that has been that there has been an enormous surge in terms of change and disruption around how quick can they digitalize what they do. And and I think it'll be the same in terms of Rolls Royce. When they eventually get back to being on campus again with social distancing and everything else, it has forced them to think about blended learning. So having people online and present and how that works. And I think for companies like Rolls Royce and other companies, we're also going to have to figure out blended workforces where we have people physically in offices and people working remotely. And it doesn't quite work when you have a team meeting to have everybody sitting in a conference room drinking coffee and have 2 or 3 people dial in via WebEx or Zoom. So how we work that through and how you chair and compare meetings and manage that will be a change as well. But in all of that disruption, there's actually an enormous amount of positive change that can happen in a very accelerated basis. And hopefully we'll embrace that and hold on to some of it after the immediate crisis is over.
Yeah, Declan, I couldn't agree more with some of your points. And for us, the well-being of our people has been hugely important. The mental health has been hugely important. Some people feel terribly isolated, and sometimes not the people you would expect to feel isolated. Our digital natives have proved not to be as native as they might like to think they are. They're the ones who crave the real interaction. But the idea of bookending your day, when do you start, when do you finish, a hugely important thing, and people have learned to deal with that. Zoom fatigue, shorter meetings are coming in. What we're seeing now is good practice, like meetings being scheduled to last 50 minutes rather than an hour, so you're not back to back, and all these. I think we're sort of feeling our way through it, developing some good behaviours as a result, and also, as you say, we are getting good productivity a lot of the time.
It's interesting. Declan mentioned blended workforce. I was quite interested to think about the impact all this will have on, work from home will have on sort of GBS, shared service centres, or contact centres and call centres. In terms of the operating model, in terms of location, we can see the rise of sort of any shoring, as it were. What thoughts are on any shoring?
I think you'll see bits of hybrid models develop, because of course what's happened in every country in the world, including India, is that people working in these massive service centres with thousands of people on campus have been forced to work from home as well, which of course is probably short term, but from a business continuity perspective, you'd need to make sure that the different locations can flex with each other, and also that you're able to flex depending on what might happen in terms of a health crisis again. And automation is your friend here, because automation, obviously, there are different viruses that can impact those, but a pandemic doesn't. It's more resilient.
Makes sense. I mean, automation with the pandemic, it's become more of a resilience play.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of enterprises, not only in sort of shared service centres, but physical supply chains may have been impacted quite badly. And I know that, Andrew, you're talking about the single point of failure. Tell us a bit about what you're hearing and finding from clients and members, rather.
We hear a lot about supply chains. I mean, firstly, to sort of just pick up on automation, the businesses we work with who automated early have found it very easy to close their monthly books, usually doing it within the sort of usual sort of 48-hour, 72-hour timelines they try and do it with. Those who haven't automated have really struggled, and it's gone up from days to weeks to close the monthly books. But supply chains have really been a focus. Originally it started with where businesses would say, well, we've got stuff being manufactured in China, the Chinese factories are closed, how are we going to deal with it? As time has gone on, we have conversations, people start going, well, hold on a minute. In finance, we learn about portfolio risk, but we've not managed our supply chains as a portfolio. We've managed them as sort of single supply chains, single lines, and we've done it on the basis of minimum cost and minimum cost alone. I think the days of the CFO who will just do cost minimization as the absolute priority are gone. We see businesses where just in time has actually become just too late. A motor manufacturer's production line will stop for the lack of one component, and that's millions and millions of pounds worth of manufacturing activity, which grinds to a halt very, very quickly.
Interesting. And in terms of models, in terms of the future of finance, for example, you have your own sort of move away from the pyramid, I understand, Andrew.
Yes, and that's all driven by automation. Traditionally, there'll be a lot of processing jobs in finance which were done by a large number of people, sometimes junior trainees, sometimes what would be described as clerks. That sort of work's being automated. The traditional triangle is now becoming far more of a sort of pentagon type shape with slices cut out at the bottom of that traditional pyramid. That's all about it started off with shared services, then it became about automation, and the skills that finance values are changing as well. Transactional skills are automated, analytical skills again automated, insight starting to become automated, certainly a given, and it's really all about influencing and creating impact. And the idea of finance being a back office is going very, very fast. Finance is active in the business. There's no back office anymore, not in an automated environment.
I absolutely agree with Andrew that the model is changing, and if anything, people are being held back by technology in a lot of legacy companies, including Rolls Royce, where we've been running a large finance transformation program, which is very, very complex because we're trying to update so many different things. With the COVID-19 crisis and people working from home and all of the mitigations we've had to take at very short notice in terms of investment, external resources, consultants, etc. A lot of that activity has been put on pause whilst we take stock and figure out how we move forward, and of course when we move forward. But in the middle of all of that, finance is pushed to the fore. So everything becomes around cash flow. Instead of looking at it monthly, we're looking at it weekly, daily, cash in, cash out, and all of those levers around it. So the finance teams have been incredibly busy doing all of that good work, and also getting involved in not just that tactical work, but then what? Once you've survived, what do you do next in terms of restructuring and the modelling around that? It is, from a leadership perspective, something that we have to keep an eye on. There's an enormous workload and stress put on people with, not the best of tools, when they have all the same anxieties that everybody else has about when and if I can return to work, will I have a long-term job? It's nice for Declan to talk about automation, but does this mean somebody else at the other end doesn't have a role? So, but also we have to carry the people with us through this crisis, through what will be a restructuring afterwards, and give them some hope that there is something that's worth sticking around for. And that's not just Rolls Royce, that's across all companies at the moment. So, being too hard on people in terms of productivity or what they're doing, we have to cut people quite a bit of slack and give them permission quite visibly to take time out as well.
I mean, one thing is, Dr. Fitzgerald, is that many people remain anxious as to the future. So as I mentioned, will there be a second wave? Will there be jobs to go back to? Concerns from those who have not yet caught the virus. Tell us about some of the concerns that you've been hearing as employees get ready to return to the office. What sort of advice have you been giving?
I mean, the concerns that you mentioned there are definitely ones that our employees have had. We've already alluded to Rolls Royce is in an industry that's been very badly affected by the coronavirus. You can see that if you look up. There's no planes in the sky. We're a civil aerospace business, or certainly part of what we do. So people are anxious. And I think there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of media reporting, not just about our industry, but about the coronavirus in general. There's lots of fear mongering. And so people naturally have concerns. What I will say is that we've been very transparent in our communication. Our senior executives, our executive leadership team, our CEO, everyone has been very transparent and open and accessible, which has been hugely important. So we have weekly exec yam jams on Yammer, where anyone can pose any question to the execs, and they answer those questions there and then. We've been doing regular HSE briefings. We've been doing really just trying to get all the communication, all the facts out there, because it's the uncertainty that generates anxiety. It's the what ifs. So as soon as we have information, we've been disseminating that information far and wide. We make sure that all our resources are accessible to everyone. We've been hosting specific sessions for those who would typically struggle to get access to those resources. So, for example, really easy as a company to say, well, everything's on the intranet, and that's fine. But if you're on the shop floor or in a production area, then actually what we've been doing is similar to this, actually sort of recording resources so they can be played on TV screens. We've been issuing extra resources, laptops and that sort of thing, so that people can access those resources. And we've developed an absolute plethora of health and wellbeing toolkits for managers to support their teams, but more importantly for individuals to support themselves as well. So I think really ready access to resource and toolkits, and that clear and transparent and regular communication has been key for us.
I think we're wrapping up. I think we've had some great advice, obviously, from Dr. Fitzgerald in terms of getting mentally ready for return to the office and the extent to which companies should be sort of pandemic proofing their offices. We talked about sort of this whole any shoring idea and the importance of automation as a resilience tool. Declan's sort of approach in risk mitigation and business continuity management. It's interesting to hear about the CGMA future of the finance model, looking at the ways companies can become more resilient. And so, with all this information, I hope everyone watching, I hope the transition back to work is more manageable and the future of your business and finance organisation resilient. So I guess the thing for me to do now is to thank my guests, Declan, Andrew and Dr. Fitzgerald, and to thank everyone out there for watching the conversation to the end. And please like and comment, particularly on LinkedIn, which is where we're going to sort of promote the podcast. And I hope everyone stays safe, and goodbye from me and goodbye from my guests. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Declan.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.